Welcome to the place where English isn't just a language, it's your passport to confidence, success, and powerful self-expression. The village of Oakhaven, nestled in a valley, cradled by ancient, rolling hills and bisected by the gentle, life-giving flow of the River Azure. For generations, the Azure had been the heartbeat of Oakhaven, nourishing its fertile fields, quenching the thirst of its people and livestock, and providing a steady rhythm to their lives. Its banks were where children played, where lovers met, and where the elders shared stories under the shade of colossal oak trees. Among the villagers, there lived a girl named Elora, barely 12 summers old, yet possessed of an ancient soul. Her eyes, the color of moss after a spring rain, held a depth that belied her years, and her quiet demeanor often led others to underestimate her. While other children chased butterflies through sun-dappled meadows or splashed in the shallows of the Azure, Elara could often be found perched on a gnarled root of the great willow, a colossal tree whose branches wept into the river. She wasn't just observing, she was listening. She listened to the hum of the bees, the rustle of the leaves, the murmur of the water, and the unspoken anxieties in the villagers' hurried footsteps. Elara's wisdom wasn't born of books, for Oakhaven had few, nor of formal schooling, which was rudimentary at best. It was an intuitive understanding, a profound empathy that allowed her to see the intricate connections between things, much like the roots of the great willow intertwined beneath the earth. When a child lost a treasured wooden bird, Elara knew precisely where the wind would have carried it. When a quarrel festered between neighbors, her quiet words, often just a single, insightful question, could unravel the knot of misunderstanding. The elders, initially perplexed by her insights, had come to call her the Whispering Willow, for her words, though soft, often carried the weight of ages. The first signs of trouble were subtle, almost imperceptible. The River Azure, once a robust artery, began to thin, its playful gurgle softened to a hesitant whisper. The water level, usually reaching the ankles of children wading at the ford, now barely covered their toes. Farmers, their brows furrowed with concern, noticed their crops, usually vibrant and lush, beginning to show signs of stress, leaves curling, stalks browning prematurely. Old Man Tiber, the village elder, and a man whose face was a roadmap of Oakhaven's history, called a meeting in the communal hall. His voice, usually booming with authority, was laced with worry. The azure is failing us, he declared, his gaze sweeping across the anxious faces. We have prayed. We have offered our thanks. But still, the river dwindles. Suggestions flew thick and fast. We must dig deeper wells, cried one farmer, his hands calloused from years of tilling the earth. Perhaps a new dam upstream, offered another, thinking of redirecting what little water remained. Many spoke of divine displeasure, urging more fervent prayers and offerings. Ilara sat quietly at the edge of the gathering, her gaze fixed on the flickering flame of a single oil lamp. She listened, not just to the words, but to the fear and desperation beneath them. Later that evening, as the last sliver of twilight painted the sky in hues of lavender and rose, Ilara walked to the great willow. She ran her small hand over its ancient bark. Cool and rough beneath her touch, she closed her eyes. Not to pray, but to listen more deeply. She heard the faint, almost imperceptible sigh of the dying grass, the anxious chirping of crickets, usually vibrant with life, and the strained whisper of the azure. Her mind drifted beyond the village, following the river's path upstream, past the familiar bends and rapids, into the untouched wilderness of the Whisperwood. The Whisperwood was a vast, dense forest that had always been the source of the azure. Villagers rarely ventured deep into its heart, respecting its ancient mysteries. But lately, there had been rumors, hushed and fearful, of strange sounds emanating from its depths, the rhythmic thud of axes, the groan of falling giants. The next morning, Ilara approached Old Man Tiber. He was inspecting a patch of wilting wheat. His shoulders slumped. Elder Tiber, she began, a voice soft but clear. The river is not failing us. We are failing the river. Tiber turned. His eyes, usually sharp, clouded with fatigue. What do you mean? Child, we have done all we know to do. The azure is sick, Ilara explained, her gaze steady. Its lifeblood comes from the Whisperwood. I have heard the sounds, even from here. The trees are falling. Tiber scoffed gently. The Whisperwood is vast. Ilara, a few trees here or there would not affect the mighty azure. But what if it is not a few? Ilara pressed. What if it is many? And what if the roots of the trees hold the earth? And the earth holds the water. And without them, the water simply runs away, instead of sinking into the ground to feed the springs. Tiber paused, considering her words. The villagers had always taken the Whisperwood for granted. seeing it as an endless source of timber for their homes and fires. But the idea that its decline could directly impact the river was a thought that had not occurred to him, nor to any of the other elders. Still, to venture deep into the Whisperwood was dangerous, and to suggest that their own actions were the cause of their misfortune was a bitter pill to swallow. Despite Tiber's initial skepticism, Ilara's quiet conviction had planted a seed of doubt. The dwindling river was a stark reality, and traditional methods were yielding no results. After much deliberation, Tiber agreed to send a small scouting party, led by a seasoned hunter named Kyle, into the Whisperwood, Ilara, against the protests of her parents. Insisted on accompanying them. "I know where to listen," she simply stated, and her unwavering resolve eventually swayed Tiber. The journey into the Whisperwood was arduous. The forest, usually alive with the chatter of birds and the rustle of unseen creatures, was eerily silent in places. As they ventured deeper, the air grew heavy with the scent of sawdust and damp earth. Then they saw it, not just a few fallen trees, but vast swathes of the forest floor laid bare. Giant ancient trees felled and dragged away, leaving behind gaping wounds in the earth. The sounds Ilara had heard were not just rumours, they were the echoes of destruction. Kale, his face grim, pointed to crude tracks in the mud. "Timber merchants," he muttered, his voice tight with anger. "From the lowland towns, they've been coming further and further upriver, taking the oldest, largest trees." Ilara knelt, examining the exposed earth. Without the dense canopy, the sun beat down fiercely, baking the soil. Without the intricate network of roots, the ground was loose and eroding. She saw small rivulets of water instead of sinking into the earth, simply running across the surface, carrying away topsoil and flowing directly into the main tributaries of the Azure. This was it. This was why the river was dwindling. The forest wasn't just a source of wood, it was a living sponge, holding the water, filtering it, and releasing it slowly into the river. Without the trees, the water rushed away, taking the earth with it, leaving the river starved and muddy. When they returned to Oakhaven, the news hit the village like a cold wave. Anger flared, directed at the lowland merchants, but also at themselves for their ignorance. "We must stop them," cried some. "We must build walls to hold the water," suggested others. Still thinking in terms of immediate, isolated solutions, Ilara waited for the fervour to die down. Then she spoke. "Stopping them is only part of the answer. We must heal the forest. We must plant new trees. A murmur went through the crowd. Planting trees was slow work, and the river was dying now. It will take years. Elara, someone exclaimed, we need water today. And if we do not plant today, Elara replied, her voice gaining a surprising resonance, we will have no river tomorrow, or the day after. The river is part of the forest, and the forest is part of the river. They are one. We must restore the balance. Her words, though simple, carried the weight of undeniable truth. The villagers had always seen the forest as separate from the river, a resource to be exploited. Elara's insight forced them to see the interconnectedness. The task was daunting. The village of Oakhaven was not large, and the area of deforestation was vast. Many still doubted, believing that the task was too great, or that the river was simply fated to dwindle. But Elara, with the quiet support of Old Man Tiber, began to organize. She didn't demand or command. She inspired. She spoke to the children, telling them stories of the forest's magic, of how each sapling they planted would become a guardian of the river. She showed the farmers how the exposed earth was washing away, taking with it the very soil their crops depended on. She explained to the women how the lack of water would eventually affect their families, their health, their very way of life. Elara understood that true wisdom wasn't just about finding the right answer. It was about convincing others to see it, to believe in it, and to act upon it. She knew that fear could paralyze, but hope, combined with a clear path forward, could move mountains, or, in this case, plant forests. She proposed a plan. First, a small group, including Kale and some of the younger, more agile villagers, would continue to patrol the edges of the Whisperwood, deterring the timber merchants. They wouldn't engage in violence, but their presence and the clear message that Oakhaven was now actively protecting its forest would be enough. Second, and most importantly, they would begin the massive undertaking of reforestation. Elara had spent days observing the forest, identifying the types of trees that grew fastest, those that held the most water, and those that provided the best shade. She taught the villagers how to collect seeds, how to prepare the soil, and how to nurture the delicate saplings. The first few weeks were slow and disheartening. The sun beat down, the ground was hard, and the progress seemed agonizingly slow. Some villagers grumbled, their backs aching, their hopes waning. But Elara was relentless. Not in a demanding way, but in her quiet, persistent presence. She worked alongside them. her small hands digging, her brow furrowed with concentration. She celebrated every sprout, every tiny green shoot that pushed through the earth. She also introduced small, immediate measures to conserve water within the village, demonstrating how to collect rainwater, how to reuse water from washing, and how to irrigate their crops more efficiently. These small victories, though seemingly insignificant compared to the vastness of the problem, gave the villagers a sense of agency, a feeling that they were fighting back. One afternoon, as a group of women were planting saplings, a sudden, fierce downpour erupted. Instead of cheering, many groaned, knowing that much of the water would simply run off the parched, exposed earth, causing more erosion. But Ilara, her face streaked with mud, pointed. "Look," she cried, her voice barely audible above the drumming rain. "The saplings, they are holding the earth." Indeed, around the newly planted saplings, tiny puddles formed, and the soil, though still eroding in places, was held more firmly than in the completely barren areas. It was a small victory, a tangible sign that their efforts were not in vain. It was a moment of collective understanding, a realization that Ilara's vision, though long-term, was rooted in immediate, observable truths. Months turned into a year. The work was relentless. The villagers, once divided by despair and short-sighted solutions, had found a common purpose. The children, inspired by Ilara's stories, became enthusiastic planters, their laughter echoing through the recovering forest. The elders, witnessing the gradual return of life to the whisperwood, spoke of Ilara not just as the whispering willow, but as the guardian of the azure. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the river azure began to heal. Its whisper grew stronger, its flow more confident. The water, once muddy and thin, became clearer, its surface reflecting the deepening green of the recovering forest. The fish, which had dwindled to almost nothing, began to return. The crops, though still needing careful management, yielded more bountiful harvests. The change wasn't just in the river or the forest, it was in the spirit of Oakhaven. The villagers had learned a profound lesson in interconnectedness. They understood now that the health of their community was inextricably linked to the health of their environment. They had learned patience, perseverance, and the power of collective action guided by foresight. Ilara, though still young, was now a respected figure in Oakhaven. Her insights were sought after, not just for environmental matters, but for disputes, for planning, for understanding the subtle currents of human nature. She never sought power or accolades. Her satisfaction came from seeing the village thrive, from witnessing the renewed vibrancy of the river and the forest. One crisp autumn evening, as the leaves of the great willow turned to gold, Elora sat by the river bank with Old Man Tiber. The azure flowed with a strong, steady current, its surface glinting under the moonlight. "You saved us, Elora," Tiber said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saw what we, with all our years, could not." Elora smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. "I didn't save us, Elder Tiber. We saved ourselves. I only listened to the whispers that were always there, waiting to be heard. The whispers of the river, the whispers of the trees, and the whispers of the earth itself. Wisdom isn't about knowing all the answers, but about understanding the questions that truly matter and having the courage to listen to the quiet truths." She picked up a smooth, river-worn stone and skipped it across the water. It bounced twice, then sank, sending ripples across the moonlit surface. "And wisdom," she added, her gaze following the fading ripples, "is also about knowing that every action, no matter how small, sends out its own ripples. And sometimes those ripples can change the course of a river or the fate of a village." The village of Oakhaven continued to prosper, a testament to the wisdom that bloomed not from age, but from a profound connection to the world and a heart open enough to truly listen. And Elora, the girl who listened to the whispers, continued to learn, knowing that true wisdom was an endless journey, as deep and flowing as the river azure itself.